I've been here at WT for the last 3-ish years. I started the week before spring break of March 2020. So you might know what happened after spring break of March 2020. That was a great time to be in communications. Let me tell you, I learned a lot right then. And then I had to meet a lot of people by Zoom for the next several months. So I'm very happy that Gina asked me to do this. This is kind of an adaptation of one that I've done, of a presentation I've done for communicators on our campus and other people in colleges and departments and offices across campus, just to kind of let them know what I do, what I can do for them. And so I guess we'll just get started then. So media relations, how to make the most of publicity opportunities. We'll start with the basics, with the press release. So a press release, it helps you establish and maintain your media relationships, number one. You get into a regular habit of sending out news releases. Your journalist friends get into the habit of receiving them from you, getting to know you a little bit in your introductory email, knowing who to contact if they have a question about your business, about your company, about your service, or more broadly about these types of service that you have. If they're looking for an expert opinion about something, they think, oh, hey, I've got that person's contact info in my inbox. It also helps if you're faced with a communications crisis. You've already developed a relationship with the media out there. They're not hitting you blind. You've already worked with them. You're familiar with their style, with the kind of questions or the way they ask their questions, how deeply they dig, how shallow they might be. That's all helpful information to have in your back pocket. Press releases help you control the narrative about your company or about, in my example, the university. One of our major narrative pushes is that we are a regional research university. So I try to emphasize as much research as possible. I'm looking around for our faculty members who are publishing or who are engaging in experiments that have real solid regional impact, and we want to really highlight those. Of course, one of our other narratives is we're a public university, and we educate students. So any kind of student-related news release, I'm always excited to get that out not only to our regional media, but also to the hometown of that student. So other students from there, other families see, hey, there's things going on up in Canyon, Texas. Let's check that out. Admissions is always one of our number one goals. Helps you build SEO. Helps you build engagement on your website. Keep driving people to your site. Keep boosting you up in the Google searches. That's always very helpful to get your word out. And you also want to synchronize your news releases across your social media platforms. We mostly use Facebook. We use Twitter, but we don't get much engagement. And we do limited on LinkedIn, mostly thinking about the audience that's going to be on LinkedIn. So a lot of business type stories go out there. Before you even put out a press release, it's helpful to think about what your goal is, and then figure out what the best tactic is. A release gets you a short story, gives you space to explain, offer quotes, get a little bit in depth on your new product line, your new hire, your new CEO, your new whatever. So if that's what you're looking for, then a press release is your best bet. You might want to just do a pitch to a specific reporter who covers your industry, or covers new businesses if you're a startup. So you can just, instead of sending out a full release, you can say, hey, I'd love to talk to you about this. I'd love to get you down here and let you do your own story instead of being guided by this. It gives them the feeling of control, the illusion of control, but you're still there to help guide the narrative. You can also do, if you've got an event, and perhaps maybe if it's not especially open to the public, but you still want some coverage of it, send out an advisory. Hey, this is just a couple of paragraphs about what we've got going on. They'll probably report it as a story, but then they can also come out. They'll know that they are invited to come out, shoot video, talk to people at the event. If there's a topic in the news that one of your people has a unique take on, or just some expertise in, consider writing a guest essay for the Amarillo Globe News and for other regional newspapers. Usually about a 600-word essay. You can also send it to the TV stations. They're obviously not going to run an essay on their air, but it may prompt them to say, "Hey, this is a good story. We can do our own take on this and interview this person." And then for the big stuff, if you are opening a new office building, or you've got a major new hire, or you're about to launch a new initiative or something like that, that's when you're going to look at a press conference. That way the journalists also come to you. They get lots of interviews on the ground, and then get some of their own B-roll. And that's when you want to really blow it out. When you're writing a news release, these are the questions you want every news release to answer: who, what, when, where, how much, and why. Just if you're answering all of those, you're going to be answering most of the questions that any journalist is going to ask you. You don't want to write something about something that's old. They're going to just throw it away. They're going to delete it. News releases should be new and newsworthy. They should be timely, relevant, and impactful. You also want to know your audience when you're writing it. That's when I'm working with some of our faculty members about their research, for example, that if it's a paper that they're publishing in an academic journal, that's a totally different audience from your typical media reporters in this area and their audiences. I tell my folks we need to get it down to at least, or at most, an 8th grade level. Maybe go a little below that, and so that's sometimes one of the hardest part of my job, is to figure out what these brilliant faculty members are telling me and translating that into everyday speak. But that's all part of knowing your audience. Your audience is the broad Texas Panhandle or the Amarillo media market for the most part. So keep it to concise, simple to understand language, so that your message isn't getting lost. We'll send you this slideshow so you can click on these links that I have embedded in here. These are just some really good tips on how to write a press release from PR Daily. Your press release should include news that should demand a reader's attention. So as you know, there's so many different things that are competing for people's attention every day, every second of the day. So you need to have a compelling headline and a grabby lead. The lead is your first paragraph. Some companies want to emphasize putting the full name of the company. I don't disagree with that. And their NASDAQs and all this very basic information in the first paragraph of every news release. And I just don't think that's a great habit to get into. You want the reader's eyes, whether that is a reporter or whether that's somebody who's clicking on your press release off of Facebook or Twitter. You want them to keep reading the story, so you got to grab their attention in the first few words. If the first few words are just the same thing every time, they're not going to read it. The lead should tell the audience why it should care. The headline should also give a hint why it should care. I always, for example, try to use WT almost like 99% of the time. I have WT in the headline and the name of the university spelled out in the lead. But I'm also looking for attention-grabbing language in there that's going to say, hey, this is a story from WT about something that I need to care about. Often you'll want to find a human story that can illustrate statistics or data. People care about people. People generally don't care a little less about data and stats. It's very tempting sometimes, I know, to fall back on jargon. Speaking to people in the same business as you are, you're speaking a common language. Not everybody speaks that language, so keep that in mind. Avoid cliches just because they're lazy. Don't be lazy when you're writing a news release. Be clever. Avoid corporate speak for the same reason as jargon. You need to speak to the audience, not speak to your peers. Include a quote. Always include a quote. It helps personalize the release. You can put if you put in a good quote, they're going to pick it up and use it themselves. And you're continuing to carry on your messaging through that. But it needs to be a good quote, not a boring pablum, is what I say here. And your comms person needs to be empowered to be able to push back. If somebody gives them something that's not going to work for the messaging and it's not going to, and it doesn't work for readability, interest, your comms person should be able to push back and say, hey, how about this instead? Or can you take another pass at that? Let's make sure we talk about this. When you're reporting your own news release, when you are going out there to gather the information that you need, make sure you get all the facts right, obviously, but don't just give up. It takes as long as it takes, and however many calls and however many emails it takes, you need to make sure you're getting the information out right, because that ultimately is what's going to be reflecting on your reputation. This is a great quote from that article. Whatever you do, don't be boring. As a longtime journalist, I can't tell you how many boring news releases I got. The best ones are stick out. The best ones are going to think, hey, I wasn't thinking that this would be a story, but this really makes it sound interesting. This introductory email also helps make it sound interesting. These are my requirements here at WT, and I think they're good for anybody. You should always have a photo with your news release. It helps draw the audience's eyes when you're posting it on social media. And as you know, social media is the frontier of media now. So you can go straight to the audiences there to make sure get them to follow you. You don't have to go through our journalistic friends at the TV stations and the newspapers around here, although I'm not saying to avoid them at all. But so when you're posting a news release, you need to make sure it has a photo. How often do you click on a link on social media that has no photo? Probably not very often. You're much more likely to click a link if there's something that draws your eye in. Not just the headline, but also some strong image. Most, other than Instagram, most social media platforms favor a horizontal or sometimes a square photo. So that's what you should be shooting. You don't want it to, and try to look up the dimensions for Facebook. We generally do a 16:9 photo on our website, and that translates well to Facebook. Most of the time, that means the face isn't going to be cut off at their eyeball or their chin. It should be pretty close up. You want to be able to see faces. That makes it more engaging. Just take a quick YouTube tutorial on the basics of photography, and then make sure you have a decent phone. If you've got a good enough phone, you don't need to get a big expensive camera. It's already built into your phone. The other thing that I always do is I let key people review a news release before it's sent. I don't typically get into 20 people going back and forth about every single little detail, but you find the one or two people who know the information, and hopefully we'll get back to you soon. Give them a deadline. Say this news release needs to go out by this time, so let's get all your changes in by this time.
Yep.
Yes.
Going back to the pictures, what is your opinion if you don't have a picture that is unique to the event, whatever it is your press release is for? And I know we had that happen where it's a new event, so we don't have a picture. What's your recommendation for something so you're not having to use a stock photo?
Yeah, I would not use just a stock photo of people sitting around a table laughing or anything like that. If I would use a nice storefront of your building. Like we've got a gorgeous shot of the Enterprise Center. If I don't have another photo, that's always a great option to use for them.
Perfect.
You can also just build a generic thing. We have a nice aerial shot of the campus, and we've overlaid the WT logo on top of that. And it's kind of a blurry background, so the WT really pops out. That's great. It serves its purpose. I just don't want to get in the habit of using it too often, because your eye just tends to glaze over if you've seen the same image over and over again.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so when I'm writing a new press release, I use Associated Press style. The Associated Press is it's a wire service that has provided news to member newspapers and TV stations around the world for much longer than I've been alive. They are the industry standard on writing. Some publications like the New York Times and the New Yorker magazine and others have their own style as well, but virtually every reporter that you're going to be working with have been trained in AP style. So you're going to be speaking their language when you're sending them a news release. This is another great link that you'll have access to when I send it, when you get the full slideshow, but it's a great one to read. And I've pounded it home to the communicators on our campus. AP style prioritizes clear, concise language, and it gives you your pitch the best chance of getting noticed, of breaking through. This is a great quote from them. Anytime a journalist spends deleting your Oxford commas or lowercasing your job titles following a person's name, is time they could have spent reporting, interviewing, and building relationships. Those are two of the biggest bugaboos in AP style that I still have to
personally attacked, Chip.
I am personally attacking you right now. It is not a sign of disrespect to lowercase somebody's job title if it appears after their name. It's just AP style.
And it's so hard when you're used to writing. You may have been trained if you went to school in APA or MLA, and I put Oxford commas in everything. And that's why it's so important to have somebody like you review that. I miss that. Every single time I miss that.
Yep, everybody does. It's a very common thing. I'm becoming a little bit more agnostic on an Oxford comma as I get older, but it's what the AP style demands. So the Oxford comma is a serial comma. It's the last comma before. If you've got a series of three things, peanut, bacon, lettuce, and tomato, you put a comma after bacon, but AP style says you do not put one after lettuce. It's bacon, comma, lettuce, and tomato. I think it's something to do with conserving the number of spaces back when they did hot type. But I'm not 100% sure about that. That could just be an urban legend. Anyway, don't do it. Because when there are so many news releases to choose from, why waste time correcting simple errors in a press release when you can just hit delete and pretend you never saw it? When you're sending out press releases, this is more into the strategy side of this. Think about your schedule. I have a schedule generally for the entire academic year of things that I know that are going to happen. Obviously, things come up. We find out about new research. We have a major gift. We have anything else that's going on. Those get slotted in there, but you get your schedule so you know where you slot things around. That way you'll know, oh, this is a really busy week. I'm putting out a lot of things. Maybe this release can hold another week or another couple of days. You look at the specific stories that you're working on, and sometimes you really love it and you think this is a great story, and nobody picked it up. That's the time that you can give it another push. Hey, I want to remind you about this. This is not over. We're still doing this research. We are still holding this job fair on this day. Take a look at this. I really think you can get a really interesting story out of this. There are times when, for example, if we have something going on in the realm of water and research in water, I know there's a reporter at ABC7 here that loves doing stories about water. So oftentimes, if I know I've got this coming out, I'll give him a leg up on it a day or so in advance. Let him get a story done, and then I'll push it out to the rest of the crowd. And I try to rotate that through the TV stations and the newspaper, not playing favorites, just giving them, developing that relationship. Not necessarily that I'm going to call in that favor later, but a good relationship with a newspaper or with a reporter is always a nice thing to have. At times, you're going to want to look outside of this region. My typical news releases go out to about 100 reporters, producers, editors, assignment editors, publishers, general managers throughout the top 26 counties of Texas Panhandle, eastern New Mexico, the Oklahoma Panhandle. That's our primary geographic focus. So my releases cover that. If I have a student mentioned in a news release and they're from somewhere else, I look up that newspaper or that media outlet from their hometown, send it there as well. But then especially I keep going back to research, but that's so often the case is when I'm doing a story about or putting out a news release about research, that's not going to just impact our region. There are people who are writing about that kind of about that kind of subject matter all over the place. We use a service called Meltwater, and it not only tracks our media mentions anytime that our keynotes or keywords show up in media reports around the world. We get a notification of that, and that's our university's name. That is WTAMU faculty. That's WTAMU alumni. It's athletics, the big things, you know. We get notifications of that, and that way we can share those media hits on our news feed on our website, driving people back and forth, doing all that stuff. But Meltwater also lets you pull a list of reporters writing about specific topics. I can't tell you how much it costs you a month. It's a good investment for us, and there are other resources like that. I can, for example, last spring we had through our educational doctorate program, they launched a rural research fellowship. So they picked rural education leaders from around the country and flew them in to the Amarillo Center for an intensive 2-day seminar. They had roundtable discussions about the top issues in rural education. So I was able to send out a news release not only to our immediate reporters, but also to the home areas of each one of those fellows that were chosen for the program, and also reporters who cover higher education, rural education, small schools, things like that, in media markets all across the country. And we got a lot of great coverage out of that. So mostly you're going to be focused on your immediate area because everybody out there is really busy, but sometimes a story is going to demand a little bit more. And so do that. This is the area that I probably suffer the most in. Avoid overkill. I do send out a lot of news releases, especially at the end of the semester when we're doing all of our end of year honors. Spring is a really busy time, and I'm sending out 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 news releases a week for a few weeks there. I hate doing that sometimes, but we're getting the word out about our students' accomplishments, so I don't hate it too much. That's a very important thing that we do. But you want to make sure you're not drowning out your biggest stories. So if you know you've got a big announcement coming up, and you also know that this week has a lot of things going on that I can't really move necessarily, you find which one of them is flexible. That way you can move it and not let it get overwhelmed. You also want to pay attention to what's going on in the world a little bit. I was sending out news releases last week, hoping to get some attention, knowing that I would not get any attention because everybody was covering the floods in Amarillo. And obviously that's the number one story. I get that. I think one of our stories could have had a great tie-in, but nobody bit. So, oh well, we tried, and that's really all we can do. Ultimately, when you send out a news release, largely you're hoping to get interviews out of that. You want them to do their own version of a story to get it out there. Sometimes they will just publish a shortened version, an edited version of your press release on their website. They're pretty much as is. But often they want to do their own story, and that's ideal because those kind of stories are seen more. They're on video, and not just read from the desk. They've got people and they got places and they got things to catch your eye. So when I do interviews, part of my job is not only writing news releases, I'm also doing all the scheduling for any kind of interview that's going on campus or with anybody from our campus. If it is on our campus, I'm with them at all times. I'm the point person for the reporters to contact, and I'm the point person for our faculty or staff if they want to talk to a reporter. I think it works best that way. That way I and our office know what's going on. and we're the ones who already have the relationship with these reporters. So that's just, I think that works best. You want to make sure that your potential interview subject is available the day that you send out the news release, because especially our TV friends, they work on a very tight turnaround. They are looking for stories in the morning to do that late morning, finish it by early afternoon, have it on air at 5 o'clock. It's a very tight turnaround for them, and they're a one-person show. We'll get into that a little bit later, but if at all possible, make sure that the person that you've written the news release about is available to do interviews that day that you want to send it out. Schedule your release for a day that your subject is available whenever possible. I'm a little amazed that I'm still answering this question sometimes, but if I get a media request, an interview request from one of our TV stations, and I send that to somebody and say, hey, are you available to do this interview for ABC7? I need to remember better myself to always say, this means it's an on-camera interview. Their TV stations, unless there is absolutely no other option, do not want to do a phone interview. They are more likely to do a Zoom interview thanks to COVID than they were before, but still not as likely. They much prefer getting good video of somebody in their environment. It makes a better story. Like I said, as the comms person, you should be with the person who's being interviewed, so you can make sure they stay on topic. They're not going off topic. They're not winding their way through some narrative that has nothing to do with what's going on. And I am not at all shy of butting in and say, hey, ask this question too. I think nobody's told me not to. I think our reporters appreciate that because, like I said, they are doing this very quickly. They're most likely not an expert at all on this subject matter. You're going off the press release you sent out. So I'm just doing it to be helpful, to make sure that, number one, our message is out there, but number two, they're getting a good quote and building a better story. Here's another link about interview strategies. It can be complex, but you just want to make sure your person that's being interviewed, or if you are the person being interviewed, stay concise, like I said earlier, jargon free, and use plain language when talking about your core message. If a reporter asks an off-topic question, bridge it back to your message. I think that's a great question, but really what we're talking about is this. The important issue is this. You don't want to give them more material to work with than they need. So that way you can help control the messaging. Be prepared when you're doing an interview. Think of the worst question you can get and practice how you'll bridge it to get back to your core message. The only examples I can think of is there are things I don't want to share. You can all think of something that you don't necessarily want to be asked about your company. Think about that and how you would answer it by bridging it back to what you're actually there to talk about. And then use this flagging technique. The real issue is, but the bottom line is, what's really critical is use those kind of languages that when the reporters are going back listening to the interview to make their edits, to put their package together, that kind of language is a flag. And it's like, oh, here, yeah, we'll definitely use this. If you don't know the answer, don't fake it. Just say, hey, let me get back to you on that, and then get back to them on that. Don't leave them hanging. But don't just start spitballing an answer if you don't really know what it is. You don't want that to be caught on video and then used. When you say, let me get back to you on that, follow that with, here's what I can tell you, and get back to your message. Try to use positive language. Don't say that's a lie or that's untrue. Say, here's what I believe. Here's what our company believes. Always take a look at the reporter's previous work. It's all on their websites. And just kind of watch how they do stories. You can find a range of stories by those reporters and just kind of get a good feel for them. Most of our reporters are pretty friendly folks. We'll get to this in a minute. And they're not Woodward and Bernstein. For the most part. They're community members. But you get a good feel of what's going on. Don't If they ask you a question, you answer it, and then they don't ask an immediate follow up. They just kind of let the silence linger. Don't feel like you have to fill that. Just sit there with them and let it linger too. That can be a tactic from them to try to get you to say something that you weren't necessarily saying, because they do want something off the cuff, spontaneous. It's not they're trying to do a gotcha necessarily. They're just trying to make an interesting story and get human reactions in there. But don't feel like you have to play into that game. You can just let the silence linger too. They can edit all that out. You're not live. If you are in a live situation, that kind of thing is less likely to happen. Still, it's on them to fill the silence, not you. When you're doing an on-camera interview, smile. Maintain eye contact with the reporter. You're not looking at the camera, you're looking at the reporter. And you're just having a conversation with them. Try to sound and look thoughtful, even if you've been rehearsed. Don't just sound like you're reading something or reciting something that you've memorized the night before, if at all possible. And sometimes I know that's tough, and you get better with it with practice. But just try to be as conversational as you can. Use subtle hand gestures. Don't bring your hand around your face a lot. Never go off the record if at all. If they say, "Can we go off the record?" and you say, "No, don't feel comfortable with that." If you say something that you didn't mean to say, you can never say, "Oh, wait a minute, that was off the record." Most likely they're not going to go along with that, and that's not their ethical responsibility. When you are doing an interview, everything is assumed to be on the record unless something was previously set up that this would be an off the record interview. You can't do half and half, in and out on the record. You're on the record if you're doing an interview unless it's been previously specifically laid out. Always assume anything you say could wind up being published, and act accordingly. Our local reporters, the ones I've worked with for the last 3 years, and then longer as colleagues in many cases, they are generally a gracious and patient lot. Some of them are tougher than others. Some of them are more specifically assigned to do investigative work. Most of them are just trying to get their daily story, and are happy to keep a good relationship with an entity, with a company, with a university, whatever, because they realize that we all live in a community, and they're going to have to come back to you at some point. And if they've ticked you off, it's going to make their job harder. Remember, when you're being interviewed, you're not doing a morning show appearance or Studio 4, for example. These interviews are being recorded and then they're being edited, and that is really a good thing. Editing can be your friend. They are looking for the most interesting sound bites, so give them good sound bites. If you feel like you need to start over, do it. Just say something like, "Oh, hey, let me try that again. I didn't say it exactly right. I wanted to phrase it like this. Let me do that." They're going to be gracious and let you do that. Don't get hung up on ums and likes and things like that. Try not to use them, obviously, but they can do a little gracious editing of those as well. Like I said earlier, look at the reporter, not the camera. It's conversation, not a firing squad. You can just ignore the camera. It's not there. Hopefully that makes you feel a little bit more comfortable. And then wrap up this, and we'll take some questions, but with just some basic tips. As a comms person, I believe in responding effectively, accurately, and immediately whenever possible. There are probably strategic reasons to sometimes delay a response, absolutely. But for the most part, I'm going to respond as fast as I can. If I get an interview request, I'm going to immediately say, "I'm going to check into that with you and get right back to you." If it's just a request for comment, I'll reply, "Hey, yep, I'll get you that as soon as I can." I don't like leaving them hanging, because I know they're professionals and they're busy people, and why be a jerk if you don't have to be a jerk? Respond immediately, even if it's a no comment. I don't think you should dodge unless there are great reasons to maybe do so. Just if you know it's going to be a no comment, just go ahead and say that right away. If you're holding them off, that's just going to keep them interested for longer. If you immediately reply and give them as much information as you feel like you can, the story's going to die a little bit more quickly, hopefully. I work with a lot of people on staff, a lot of faculty members, a lot of staff members, a lot of students, obviously. I need to be the point person for all media requests coming to any of them. I need to be handling the scheduling, or if we have to, decline the request. Our faculty, our staff are busy professionals. And I want to be as respectful of their time as possible. So if they don't feel comfortable doing an interview, or they want a little bit of time to research it before they give the interview, it's my job to say, hey, reporter, they aren't available today, but we can do this tomorrow. I also understand that the reporters are on a deadline. So if I can push my person, I will. And I'll say, hey, their deadline is 3:00. And it's really important that we get our voice in on this story. So can we do that? The reporters, I mean, your people don't need to be in a back and forth with a reporter, though. They need to be doing their job. This is your job as a comms person, is to do that scheduling, is to do that interface. It helps you build those invaluable relationships with the reporters, like I mentioned earlier. And then the PR Daily just had a conference that I need to go to one of these days, because this sounds really good. Journalists these days are looking not only for great stories, but ones that they can tell quickly. Like I said, they often get their story assignments first thing in the morning. So by 9:00, they kind of know what they're hoping to work on for that day. So often a reporter will reach out to you between 9:30 or so if they want to talk to you that day, if that's the story topic. If a reporter is reaching out to you at about 11:30, that means at least 2 other stories have fallen through. So when I get those requests, I work really hard if I can to get that done, because I know that they are struggling and they're going to remember that next time. Like I said, I also remind our sources on campus, hey, these people are really busy. They only have a limited time. If you can't do the interview before 2:00 or 3:00, we'll pass, or we'll find somebody else maybe who can handle it, because that's their deadline. Reporters these days are responsible generally for shooting their own interviews, editing their own interviews, putting the whole package together, and then writing their script and doing a stand-up or something from the station. They're one-person shows these days. When I started at the Globe News back in the late 90s, when I would see a TV crew, it was a crew that was at least a reporter and a photographer. But those days are gone for the most part. Only the big stories typically get a reporter and a photographer. So I try to be as conscious of that as possible. Same holds true for the newspaper, by the way. It used to be a reporter and a photographer. They sometimes still send a photographer. Usually it's just a reporter using their phone as a camera and as a tape recorder for their interviews. So I just try to be very conscious of the conditions that these folks are working under, and being as helpful as possible. Pays dividends down the line. You can serve those stories up on a silver platter. Especially if they're desperately looking for a story, and your news release hits them first thing in the morning, they've got it. Then they've got 2 sources to interview. You can find different backdrops that your folks can be interviewed with. Schedule those interviews as closely together as possible, so they're not sitting around or having to go out to something else. Just get them in for one extended period, get all this that they possibly can need, and then go back to their station, and their job is done for the day. Like I said, be conscious of their deadlines and get back to them quickly. Morning interviews and press conferences are the best, because that's when they've got more time to do it and get a good story turned for the 5:00, the 6:00, the 9:00, and the 10:00. Try not to send a news release out at the end of the day unless it's something you want them to interview you about tomorrow morning. And say that in the email. Say, hey, I'm sending this out tonight, so you can put it in your calendar for tomorrow. That's a good tactic to use for those stories that needs some attention, but you need maybe a little bit more time for it to sink into the reporter that they need to give us some attention. I'm going to be sending out one on Friday, I think, embargoed until the following Tuesday. I don't do that very often. I like to do a more immediate than that. But this will give them a weekend to think about it because it's going to involve a little bit of travel. And we can get all of that arranged for the following Tuesday. If you want to disappear something, send it out on a Friday afternoon, as close to 5 o'clock as possible. They don't have anybody available generally to do the story, then it kind of gets lost. That's for the bad news things that you just have to get out there just to be transparent. But if you don't necessarily, if you wanted some attention on it, don't put it out at the end of the day or at the end of the week. That's the end of my tips and everything. Love to take some questions from you if you'd like, if you have anything.
Wow, that was fantastic. Thank you, Chip. A good refresher. Even for all of us who write press releases frequently, we need to hear those refreshers. So thank you. I'll kick us off with one question. The rest of you, if you have questions, you are welcome to unmute yourself. If you are not able to do that, you're also welcome to put those in chat and we can ask Chip. And when we are done today, you'll get a recording of this afterwards when Mackenzie's back tomorrow, and also those slides like Chip mentioned. So Chip, my question for you, and this is how I was taught many, many years ago as an undergrad in college. When you're writing a press release, try to always keep in mind you've got a reporter sitting at a desk and they're trying to read this off. Maybe they have, I don't know, 30 seconds to cover your story, and write it like they would read it to kind of hand it to them on a silver platter and make it easier. Do you still agree with that?
I'm not really trained in TV writing, so I write strictly Associated Press style.
And I know you've got that structure, the AP structure that you use, and it works really well. But I do like that it keeps things clear and they can buy that easily. If it's, Jackie reading that on Studio 4, she doesn't have to tweak much of what you send.
Right. I just go ahead and give them to them in AP style and trust that their producers will write it for them in their TV lingo. It's not much of a change. It's just a different way of structuring the sentences a little bit. They're the experts at that. I can be the expert at AP style and be that for everybody.
Perfect. All right. Do we have any other questions? I'll give y'all just a second to unmute. All right. If we don't have anything else, we will wrap up. So like I said, tomorrow we will get this recording and his slides out to you. That way you can access all of his resources. If there's anything that the SBDC can do for y'all or Enterprise Center as well, please let me know. One thing that I want to make sure we mention with all of the flooding that's going on, disaster loans for small businesses are not available quite yet. We feel like it's coming hopefully within the next week. If that's something that your business needs, or maybe you have a friend that has a business, we really, really want to reach those local business owners. Please feel free to pass along our information, and when those loans are available, we would be so glad to assist. So thank you again, Chip. It's always wonderful to see you, even if it's virtual.
You too, Gina. Thank you. Thank you all for listening, and I appreciate it. Let me reach out to me if I can ever help.
Same. Y'all have a wonderful day. Thank you.